This evening with a presentation from Nancy Eyster-Smith. Nancy, just to give a bit of background, she's been involved in the club for a very long time, but for those of you who don't know her background, she started out at the University of Southwestern Louisiana, Lafayette, Louisiana, with a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Biology in 1973. Went on to do a master's degree in paleoecology and ecology at the University of Minnesota back in the 1970s as well. She was regaling us with stories of being stuck in Labrador as part of her master's research. And then finally went on to do a PhD at the University of Arkansas in the ecology of prairie vegetation and ecosystems. As all of you know, she's been a long-standing force in NEBC on the council. In terms of her service, one of the most remarkable aspects of what she's done with the group is to be the corresponding secretary for many, many years, starting in April 1994 until present, and she's been sort of re-elected to that role. And part of the rationale for her presentation tonight is that we'll be talking about Edward Rand this evening, who was the club's first corresponding secretary back in the late 19th century. And with Nancy's nomination to another year as the corresponding secretary, she will surpass his record of 25 years to become the longest serving corresponding secretary of the New England Botanical Club. So it's a great honor. Without further ado, I will turn the proceedings over to Nancy. So kick it off.
We put this slide up just to give you something to look at before we proceeded into the show. And do you have any guesses? It does say moments at Harvard, the biological club takes the air. So they must be biologists and they must be Harvard. How about number one? What's over his shoulder?
Fertile.
It's fertile. It's a vasculum.
Nancy, would you touch the numbers? They're hard to see.
Yes, I tried to highlight them in yellow. There's number one.
The yellow blobs are clear.
Yeah, number one. He's number one, and it is fertile. This guy, I mean, I only knew 3 names in a list that was provided with last names. So I don't expect you to actually know who they are. But what do you think this guy's field of study is? Mycology. Okay, that one we can figure out. And then this guy, we know his name, and he looks like he's holding a lizard or a turtle, but we don't know anything else more about him.
What's his name?
This particular cartoon showed up in a notebook that I had sheets in plastic from the 1996 Centennial program. I was around then, right? I was elected in '94. And I don't know what year it is. There's an initial at the bottom that says GHM or something. So don't know anything at all about it. But because it has my figure of tonight, which is Edward Rand, he's smack in the middle, number 7. I thought, sure, I'll go ahead and use this at the beginning so that you can kind of enjoy it. Oh, this is not going to work. I'm going to come up here. All right. Which arrow? Oh, right. I need some help here because I tried to do the keyboard setup assistant might be stuck. I tried to do a fast forward, you know, what is it, a remote forward, and I couldn't get that to close. And I don't know anything about that. Oh good, you got something. But I took it out, so should I stick it back in again?
I don't know why it doesn't know your keyboard, but...
Well, it's not plugged in anymore. Sorry about that.
It's asking for the button to the right of your shift, but there ain't nothing there. You can skip it.
Okay, good. You're going to minute.
Sorry. All right.
There we go.
So just
Okay.
to the right.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. I can just stick here and go. So at the bottom of the piece of paper, in a very fuzzy handwriting, this is obviously blown up a lot. And so I knew Fernald, I knew Thaxter, and I knew Rand, and didn't know anybody else. But thanks to Judy Warnerman, I just asked her, got any ideas? She came up with 10 out of 11 that she's sure about. And here they are. And I don't know if you recognize any of them or not. But it's clearly based on biologists that were around at Harvard in the 1800s. And some of them lived quite a while, into the 1900s. I did happen to just see this guy's name. He was an officer at some point, and I never had seen his name before. It hadn't ever registered with me. But this is Edward Rand. Okay. Someone want to, I'll do the lights. I don't know how to do that. I do everything around here. I should be able to get the right ones down. Let's see. Not those. There we go. Looks good. Good? Okay. And we got enough of the pot lights on that you guys are okay. All right. So, as I guess I could say it now, something I'm going to say when I introduce Caitlin is, as I know I've been thinking about this, doing this talk since April 2017, so 2 years. Because I knew the 25 years were coming, and I thought, you know, I don't know anything about Edward Rand, but if I'm going to surpass his 25-year term, the least I can do is celebrate him. And that was the impetus for doing this particular talk. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity to do it. I'll explain later why Caitlin is part of it as well. Because I never had a chance to really research him. And I'll warn you now, I got carried away. So Caitlin's going to watch the time, and I'm going to go flip through slides probably too fast for you. But remember that this is being videotaped, and you can pause the video if you want to see something a little bit longer. Okay, here we go. And I will point out that that is Caitlin's 6-month-old daughter named Sawyer. And I do believe she's pretty close to being the youngest to attend an NEBC meeting. All right, so celebrating him for 25 years. So the reason for celebrating, to acknowledge his long service as I enter, thanks for your vote, for my 26th year as corresponding secretary. And as I said, to learn more about him and share some of the things that I've learned. How I became corresponding secretary for 25 years was I came to New England when I was hired at Bentley, and I was told by someone in my department who was a trustee for the New England Wildflower Society that there was also a group at Harvard, the New England Botanical Club. And so I started attending meetings regularly. And in fact, Derek Crow wrote me in a few months, I think, after I was here. He needed a fill-in 1985. I had a PhD. Easy thing to do. So that's how it started. I was elected to council 1993-94. Sort of got to know how things operated. And at that time, the current corresponding secretary was going to move on to being treasurer, which now meant they needed another corresponding secretary. So being again in, 1994 that we're talking about, and being on council, they were looking for someone who knew WordPerfect, or word processing, and it was WordPerfect in those days. And because Bentley had, in the late 80s, decided that all students would have computers, therefore all faculty and staff had to have computers as well. And indeed, I knew word processing. I ended up being the faculty senate secretary and taught the administrative assistant. We worked together to learn WordPerfect by doing the minutes of all those meetings. So I was elected in 1994 as corresponding secretary to do that job. And periodically I get asked to be sure that I do want to continue, or do I want to quit, or whatever. And what I said way back then was that I would stay until I ran out of envelopes. I did not run out of envelopes. Bentley kept changing their letterhead. I kept taking the envelopes, reusing them so they wouldn't get tossed. Departments kept changing the logos and everything. This is a stage picture I did not use a quill, I don't know. But it's staged with the actual envelopes that are left over. The I love to collect postage stamps, so it gave me an opportunity to go to the post office regularly and buy stamps that I liked, and you can see some on the table there that are from my collection. Over here is a stack of address label records. In other words, before I ran the address label sheets through the printer, I wanted to be sure it was going to print correctly, so I did it on paper first, so I wouldn't be wasting labels, and I apparently still have a stack of those. And in the foreground here is the annual program that is putting together. That, in fact, is someone was saying NEBC doesn't have an old logo. That is an old logo right there. That's the Centennial Program from 1996. So I never ran out of envelopes, and I guess I'm stuck for life. All right. Edward Rand became, of course, how did he become corresponding secretary? I, in fact, don't know for sure whether he went to the initial meeting. I'll show you something in a little bit. William Farlow invited 17 men, remember these were all men in those days, to his house to discuss starting a botanical group, and we know that 11 showed up. I haven't seen a list that tells me which 11 showed up. I kind of suspect he did, but I don't know for sure. When Edward Lothrop Rand passed away, Benjamin Robinson gave a memorial address, and then it was printed. And the reason I picked this quote, it's actually out of Caitlin's paper, but it's the same quote from Robinson's memorial address. It's basically pointing out that because Edward Rand had been the secretary for the Champlain Society since the 1880s. As you can read through the words there, he was favorably prepared for the duties that he was called upon to assume. And I did not know until recently that he only went till 1921 because of a paralyzing disability, but I don't know anything more about that. I only read that in one place, so I don't know more. He did live 3 more years, but that's all I know. All right, the duties of the current corresponding secretary from section 4 are pretty simple. Notices of meetings of the council and conduct the correspondence of the club. It obviously did not anticipate email and all the back and forth that goes on every day between other council members and so forth, which I'm happy to do, but there's a lot going on. I had just a little bit of time last month. Judy had pulled some things for me, and there was this typewritten bylaws. Didn't have a date on it, so really wasn't quite sure what it was. It's pretty much arranged like ours is now. I don't know how often the bylaws have been changed, except I know that they were changed in 1989 and 1996, and 1921, 20 or 21. Okay. So duties of the officers, corresponding secretary there, sort of the same thing, but he shall conduct the correspondence of the club, and shall notify all persons elected to membership or to the office of their election. And here in the files over at Harvard is someone who was actually receiving notice that he had been elected. He did need to be elected into the organization. He was elected in 1 month after the official founding of NEBC, February 1896, sorry, getting my numbers mixed up. And you can see what he did there. He also informed people of their, I guess he included a committee list or something. I think Ralph Bean, I saw he had some position, I don't remember now. And then J. Francis Collins, I've seen a lot of correspondence with him. But at least he had some pre-printed little form, and he only had to write a few things down and then post it to everybody. Still a little more tedious than email, but so far. All right, I'd like to have you focus on section 2 here. You did have to apply for membership, and when I came to New England, the old rules were still in place. You had to be basically presented by, where's the word two?
Up above.
Right above, by 2 resident members. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but you can see it down over here. No, it's on the next page. Resident and non-resident membership, those were separate, which we don't have now. It was because they figured if you're not going to travel, if you have to go a long way, why should you pay a lot of dues? So the corresponding secretary would get those names from two people who were going to propose them, and they bring it to council, and then council will talk about it, decide, and then it would be brought before the whole group, and then the whole group would decide whether you got in or not. And notice the section 3, if you get 3 negative votes, you're excluded. And according to Ray Angelo, there were some who did not get a vote in, and I don't know who they are. All right. I also noticed at the very bottom that section 4 said persons who, at the date of incorporation, were members of the predecessor unincorporated organization, that you could still be a member. And so this dates this bylaws now as 1920 and 21, because we became incorporated as NEBC Inc. in 1921, and I hadn't noticed that when I looked at it earlier. And notice the entrance fees, $10 if you're a resident, and $2 if you're a non-resident. And in many of the years, they produce these little small books, 4 by 5, I think they call them yearbooks. This was the 1915 one. It was actually in the possession of one of the founders of NEBC, because it's from the estate of Roland Thatcher. You can see Edward Lothrop is listed here as corresponding secretary, partway into his term of 25 years. The council is quite a bit smaller than it was now, so 6 officers and 3 more. Various standing committees, editorial board of Rodora had a publication committee, and Edward Rand and this William, what's his name? Rice. They were the ones listed on the cover of all the journals until 1994, until Rand passed away. And then it's called Constitution then. It's now bylaws, so things have changed. And resident members, there were 91 resident members in 1915, and there were 109 non-resident, and all over North Dakota and Washington State, and everywhere, other states around the U.S. Edward Rand, of course, was the corresponding secretary, and I picked a few things that I found in the files. This is in his handwriting, and I'm going to go long. I think I should read, because I've read these before. I think it will be well for you to change your status in the club from a non-resident to a resident member, as much you're likely to be an official of the new corporation. So again, 1920, so it became in 21 a new corporation. Have you any objection, provided the council can remit your annual dues? In view of your constant interest in the club and your practical regular attendance at meetings, it would seem you should have the voting power if you can attain it without increased cost to you. Have you any objection? I hope not. Hoping to receive your consent before the council meeting on November 16th. From the booklet that I just showed you, he became a member in the 3rd month of its official organization, and he lived in Rhode Island. Here it says James Franklin Collins, and most of the time he goes by J. Franklin Collins, or Rand writes him as My Dear Collins. Notice that he says by the 16th, and that was dated the 12th. And a whole bunch of stuff I've seen in the archive shows that the mail went fast. Certainly not like now. All right, I have to move back over here. All right, he was texting with colleagues. I think we lost some of our background, as it turns out, via postcard. So when I first looked in the Harvard archives, I saw a lot of postcards that had very little written on them, which immediately reminded me of texting. It looked like 2 sentences. And it turns out that the ones I found again were a little bit longer, but again, notice it was to Collins again. And notice he says, we are happy, we're glad we are not going to lose your attendance to the Botanical. I don't know what the good news is, but anyway, they're glad that he's going to be there. This particular one in 2012, I like this one. The club meeting was very interesting, but not exciting. Owing partly to the car strikers, and I looked that up, I don't know what it is. The attendance was less than usual. Well, I hope we will all meet again in October 4th. This is another one written, and I chose this one and the next one just as examples of, I think, his writings that he was taking care of as a member of the publication committee, because he's talking about sphagnum in both of these. We lost all the.
Oh, sorry.
We had the nice, I had this red, you saw the red in the one, and I sent Caitlin all of my PowerPoint, and she combined it with hers, leaving space in the middle for the introduction, so it is a really big PowerPoint. All right, I'm sorry we've lost the pretty, the pretty part for the video, but that's okay. You'll just see the font over it again. So he was one of 17 founding members of NEBC. This is an actual copy of the letter that William Farlow sent out, and this one went to George Kennedy. And he's basically saying, I should read it if you've never read it. I think he wrote the same thing over again and again. Whether or not it's possible to write those most interested in the study of our local flora into some sort of society is a point which, it seems to me, can be best ascertained by asking a few persons to come together and express their views. Therefore, I have ventured to ask a few gentlemen to meet at my house next Tuesday, December 10th, at 8 o'clock, where in a free and easy talk we can all, whether, word I think, such a project is possible or not. Will you not give me the pleasure of your company next Tuesday? Yours truly, William Farlow. Had you heard those words before? That's the only one I have ever seen that is at least a copy or some version of the 17 letters that we know were sent out, and 11 people showed up, 11 guys showed up. So this lists Rand with who the other 17 are, and some names you may recognize. I had mentioned Roland Thatcher, who was an officer quite a bit. Robinson was editor of Rhodora, and also an honorary pallbearer at his funeral. And Walter Dean was also well known in NEBC. Have you read the Me Judice poem that was passed around? You saw a lot of Walter Deans. There's some more in the chair if you didn't get one. And he was also obviously good friends with Walter Dean. There is an excellent history that's labeled as a partial history of the New England Botanical Club. Dick Howard, Richard Howard, he spoke at the 700th meeting, the 900th meeting, and the centennial meeting. And he was still alive for all of that. But I want to point out that those charter members of the 17, 7 were professional botanists and 10 were amateurs, and Edward Rand would be one of the amateurs, because in essence he was a lawyer, as we'll see later. They lived to an average age of 77 years. Rand only made it to 65. The same picture accompanies that memorial address that I was talking about, and it's well worth reading. And originally on the back of the sheet here I was going to put all kind of references for you, but since there are links to things, we'll put it online, and then you can just link to it, not have to type anything in. Right? He was on the Rhodora editorial board, as I already pointed out, and he stayed even after his paralysis for 3 more years. How do we know that there was even going to be Rhodora? Well, as corresponding secretary, he sent this letter out and said, in April of the year before, 1898, we're thinking of starting a journal. Are you interested? You'll notice here, with more than 200 subscriptions already promised, and they were looking for more promised subscriptions so they would have the funds. They also had a finance committee for Rhodora to be sure that they could fund. There is 1899, there's 1924. Here they are as the publication committee, the two together, and of course there are associate editors. He was a bard. One of the oldest of the poems long associated with the New England Botanical Club was attributed to him in 1900 and is available in a much duplicated form. You have in your hands the, again, much duplicated form. And it's called Me Judice, which, as you see over here, is a term I didn't particularly know, but since Rand was a lawyer, it means, in my opinion, or I'll be the judge of that. So I have typed up that version to match what I know is a 1961 copy, because obviously when things get retyped, things can change, words can change, punctuation can be put in. How do I know it's 1961? Because Lynn Bogle sent it to Ray Angelo and said, this is Albion's based on the writing, and on the back of Me Judice is the NEBC meeting from May 5th, I think it is, 1961. And his notes were from Don Whitehead, a paleoecologist, who was at Williams at the time and ended up in Indiana, so something of interest to me as well. And it's just surprising that it was also read at the 100th anniversary in 1996. All right, here's another one. Go to the article, and they only have this one verse, but there are 6, and sing it to my Bonnie. So bring back, oh, bring back our species of the order. Okay, at the 20th meeting of NEBC, I'm going to read this, and it's going to sound exactly like John Burns. If anyone knows a man who would enjoy the club and whom the members might enjoy, whose home is near the hub, throw off this girly bashfulness and send his name to me. I'll take it to council, see who may be elected be. We really need a lot of names, for it will be a winner if we could make new members pay the bill for this great dinner. You almost said that.
Yeah.
You were asking for new members.
Well, I didn't quite have the girlish bashfulness.
Yeah, I know, that's not quite in there. This is the most ornate anniversary dinner menu that was produced by NEBC. The 50th is also quite pretty. The 10th is also nice. You'll have to look at that up close with all the scientific names and people's faces and all kinds of things in there. And they had oysters and a whole bunch of stuff. So anyway. All right, he was a plant collector. He donated 15,000 specimens to NEBC in 1950. This particular specimen was released by Ray Angelo, because there's the NEBC stamp, and released by RA, and it went to the College of the Atlantic. And that's how Caitlin has the picture. He was a member of the Champlain Society, and Caitlin's going to say a lot more about the Champlain Society. It was something that started in 1880 when it was between his junior and senior year. A bunch of them got on a boat, took off from here and went up to Maine, to the Mount Desert Island, and they ended up founding a camp here, Camp Pometic. Am I saying it right? Pometic.
You can say it anyway.
Say it again?
Pometic or
Pometic. Pometic, there you go. Right, I've not heard these words pronounced before, so it's the Indian name for island as far as we know, and that's where it's located. I want to mention Edward Rand's brother, younger brother, because he was a photographer. And this is the only picture I know of where he's actually holding a camera, and it marks where the picture was taken. We don't know who took the picture. It wasn't him, obviously. All the other pictures that you will see black and white in here as we go through, we'd show the Champlain Society and homes and other things like that. These are all taken by Henry Lothrop with an A, Rand. Okay? Notice it says here, for some reason, the brothers chose to spell their middle names differently. The person who wrote this didn't have the explanation, but I'm not sure I entirely do either, but I have a piece of it, so I'll talk about that later. It says here, the pictures show he's an artist and a visual diarist of his time. He took, there's over 15,000 pictures. I think there's around 1,500 pictures that are in Maine at the Southwest Harbor Public Library, and they've been digitized, and that's how I have access to them, because they are online now. Amazing sort of work. All right, here is the Champlain Society. I knew they, went on the boat and then went camping for the summer on the island. Didn't quite know what it was going to be like. This is actually the parlor tent. These are the residential tents, and I believe that's the eating tent. And this is, I think can you all read the bottom without me saying anything more about what it is? I'll show you what it is. This is the parlor tent. And Caitlin and I are pretty sure this is our friend Edward Rand. He didn't have a plant specimen with him, but he was reading. They were there for a lot of the summer, and this was where it overlooked Somme Sound, which is one of the sort of fingers that go up between the elevations on the island. And even though it looked like it might be kind of lonely, it wasn't. There were plenty of people around there for the summer, and hotels and homes and cottages with 30 rooms and so forth, cottages. Edward Rand and a group went to High Head. I'm not entirely sure which one is him in this picture, but I know it was taken the same day as this one, and it's easy for us to find which one he is because he's got his vasculum with him. I'm not sure who any of the other people are. This particular picture I had just seen last month in this envelope, very delicate, very fragile, marked fragile, and Richard Eaton, that's his name, right? 1962, it said, "The man on the right standing may be Edward L. Rand." Well, because over in Maine, they have all these pictures digitized with at least 2 of the free notebooks from Edward Rand. We know exactly what all of his pictures are. And what did I say? Edward Henry Rand, we have Henry Rand's notebooks, and so we know who it is, so it's for sure. And of course, Caitlin and I saw him with the vasculum and said, yeah, that's gotta be. All right, on their webpage, they're not, you know, they figure most people don't know what a vasculum is, so at least they have this that you can click on and get an idea of what one looks like. Here they are. It says a buckboard party, but to me it looks kind of like a limousine cart. It's so long. And where's Rand? Right there's his vasculum. This is where High Head is on the island. Bar Harbor's over here. And is this the Sound?
Yeah, the Sound.
Somewhere right there. And the Sounds is where they spent most of it. Squid Cove is another place sort of up by High, I don't know, what is it, High Head?
Yeah.
Ernest Lovering, Caitlin tells me, was a member of the Champlain Society. And he was also an honorary pallbearer at Edward Rand's funeral, along with Sam Elliott, the brother of Charles Elliott, the founder of the Trustees of Reservation, and the son of the president of Harvard for 4 years. Pretty well connected. Here's where Squid Cove is. There's where High Head is. Don't know where the Seawall House Pavilion is, but you can't miss Rand. He's got his basket. This was labeled as a reunion of the members, and when I first saw it, because it did start in 1980, and it went, 1880, and went till 1888, and I thought, well, would they have a reunion after that or whatever? No, they were already reunioning in May 1881. Maybe planning for the next summer. It was not that long they've gone. This has got to be Edward Rand in the middle. All right, he was a husband. This is the woman he married, but he'd known her for 10 years before they actually did get married. They did not have any children. And in fact, Rand's brothers and sisters also did not have any children. So the line ended. He was a lawyer, as I already mentioned. There's no picture in the archives of 1884, so I chose the next closest one to sort of show that they have been taking Harvard Law School pictures for a long time. We have his business card. Actually, we have, I don't know, we must have his business card. It's been digitized. There it is. Be sure when you go, take the elevators. He was a cartographer. He compiled, of course he started with a regular, geological map that would have been available earlier. Here you can see the label on it, compiled for the flora of Mount Desert Island. And this is the June 1893 version. And Caitlin told me that if the map is in the flora, it's worth a whole lot more than if you end up with a volume that doesn't have the map. It's a rather beautiful map, and people framed it instead of leaving it in the book. He was a path maker. I'm going to show you a map in a minute that these two figures come from, but it's showing how he started out with his other map and is explaining what the curved lines are and everything. This is 1911. He had help on this one, 2 other people, but this is the eastern part where, close to Bar Harbor and where there's lots of people visiting. And there's another little notes down here. I particularly like the part about the laws regarding setting fires will be strictly observed, and great care should be taken to remove all remnants of luncheons and to avoid the breaking of bottles and doing injury of any kind. I thought luncheons sounded funny too. He was the first chairman of the Path Committee. There's a rock where this plaque is. It's on the seaside path between Jordan Pond and Seal Harbor, sort of in the bottom right corner, I guess southeast corner of the island. And of course it recognizes him for the flora and also making the maps, compiling all the maps of the paths. He worked, the Champlain Society, including Rand, their work led to the establishment of Acadia National Park. This is a 1928 map, and it says map of Lafayette National Park. When Woodrow Wilson made this a national monument, it had Champlain's name, French, whatever, I'm not going to try and pronounce anything. And then a couple of years later, 3 years later, it became the Lafayette National Park after the Marquis de Lafayette. And then by 1929, and I think that's maybe why this map was maybe being made or something, by 1929, they ended up changing it to Acadia National Park to recognize the French colonists, the Acadians who lived in that area. He was appointed as his class secretary reports on him, what he's up to, just like people do today, except they put it in Facebook. And of course, there he was appointed the botanist. This is the outlay of the national park today. Edward Lothrop Rand was Edward Sprague Rand the Fourth. Now, isn't that a really weird thing to say? But indeed, if you go to the Southwest Harbor Public Library Digital Archive, these are the Rands that they list. This is our Henry that we're talking about. I just noticed it's misspelled. No, I'm sorry, where's
That's
Edward?
right.
Not Henry. This is the photographer.
Edward's higher up.
Ed's are higher up. Okay, sorry. Sideways here. This, well, there's Edward Lothrop Rand, and that's the one we're talking about. But notice that there is a Rand 2 and a Rand 3, and he is technically a Rand 4, and that's what he was named. His brother has the middle name Lothrop, and Edward changed it to this, and I'll explain why in a minute. Arnold Augustus was an uncle, so the brother of his father, and in the Civil War. This is his sister, and then there's some cousins and some other people in there. And at the end of the talk, I'll show you how the digital archive is a relational database that's just fantastic to go through. It's very easy to follow all kinds of things. All right, I know I wrote a lot on these slides because I figured maybe by now I might not remember all the details. Here's the good stuff. No, and it's kind of weird because sometimes he called himself Junior. He was a lawyer, horticulturist. He had greenhouses at a Dedham house called Glen Ridge. He had cultivated orchids and had rhododendrons, and it was estimated that just to run his greenhouses, it cost $10,000 a year. You know, we're talking in the 1800s. Notice that the greenhouses are valued at $2,500. Even the trees and plants are what did I say? $2,500, that's right. $3,000, and the 30-room residence was only valued at $12,000. His family, his wife and his kids moved to Cambridge in 1877 when the house was sold, and he moved to Para, Brazil, where he lived for 20 years. Why would he leave all this behind? He didn't get divorced. He apparently, and I'll use the words right from this article written by the person who was very much involved, Meredith Hutchins, the digital collection is now dedicated to her. He mortgaged his house way out of line. He was misappropriating money. People were thinking, oh, if we don't arrest him, he's going to get away, and we're not going to better release him. Apparently he got out. I don't know how he got out and how he got a passport fast enough to get on a boat and get to Brazil. And like I said, he lived there for 20 years. He established one of the largest collections in the world there. People would come and visit him. He wrote horticultural books, orchids and water lilies, those big Amazon, floating boats were named after him. And I guess he was declining and not feeling great, and so he took a dose of strychnine to call it up. What I didn't put on here is he had told someone, when I die, come get my orchids. I don't remember the details, I'm sorry, but come get my orchids and move them. And they did. They packaged them all up and took them somewhere. I'm not sure, I forgot. So it's thought that Edward Sprague Rand IV changed his name to avoid being confused with his father, especially a disgraced father. Notice his mother's family's name is Lothrop, and Henry Lothrop, the photographer, is an A, and it's not known why he chose Lothrop. It's just a slight variation, but it was indeed his own name. This is where Para, Brazil is. Right there's the Amazon River, so he's pretty close to nice tropical stuff. Ethridge Grimm and his family lived within blocks of here. That is, after they left Dedham, they moved to 16 Quincy Avenue here in Cambridge. His mother moved, his sister, who never married, moved, and Edward came to and lived in this house I'm going to mention here in a minute while he went to Harvard. It's literally within walking distance. It was 16 Quincy Street where they lived, according to all records. But it's not this 16 Quincy Street, because this is the Dana Palmer house, which was moved from across the street. Anybody know where Quincy Street is? You know, you come up to past the fire station and you're getting ready to turn left to come this way toward Oxford and on Kirkland. Just go the other way. That's Oxford. That's how close it is. This house is right next to the faculty club, where in fact we had our centennial as well. So don't know where 16 Quincy is. Maybe it was torn down. So they decided to stay in Cambridge, but move over to Kirkland Street. And you know, doesn't quite look like that today. It might look like this tomorrow. But this is looking from where the house is. If you look right about here, about there probably, that would be where you'd turn in to go over to the herbarium. That's how close it is. Jenny's house is right here. And I'll blow it up. Her house is there. The herbarium is now here. And we are right there. It's 1 block away from this street, and so 2 or 3 blocks away at most from where we are today. And I just never knew this. I just thought it was so cool. So that's why I got carried away, and I'm going way too long, but I hope you're enjoying it. So the house was built in 1886. Notice it has these 3 dormers at the top and big chimneys and so forth. As I said, Margaret was never married, so she still lived in the house. This is her bedroom. Notice the fireplace to keep it warm. She was also an artist and a horticulturist. Interestingly, this painting almost looks like Henry took pictures of flowers in vases, very nice pictures. That looks like one of them, so I don't know if that's just accident or whatever, it just looks like it. We know that he lived there for a little while. Henry did, the photographer did for a little while, because he says this is basically out of my window looking in the other direction, not looking west but looking east. And nice carriage through here to sort of help date it. He moved back home to live with his sister after his own wife died. When they were on Mount Desert Island, I think, when that happened. All right, so here's the good view of the house. Big chimneys, these 3 dormers, the rounded part here. 1 block that way, it's still there. There it is. Big chimneys are gone, the rounded part is still there, the fence has changed, but it's still there. I probably walked by it, never knew it. He and his extended family are buried in Mount Auburn Cemetery. I didn't know that either. I had big plans today to actually go visit him and talk to him and tell him we were celebrating him today, but that just didn't work out. So as I drove by Mount Auburn, I just said, "Hi, Henry." Talk, like Edward, I'll come talk to you later. I could say, "Hi, Henry." Henry's there too. The whole family's there. All right, so you want to go visit him? I had it all figured out. You just enter on Spruce and stay on Spruce and come around, and it's right there. That's where all the Rands are together. Google tells you where it is. You stand right here and look. I knew from the tombstone that I had a picture of that had to be it there right behind the other. There's the tombstone. And he and his wife are buried there. And I was told when I called the cemetery that he was cremated. So I was glad to see a nice stone. It's been a pleasure to follow Edward Lothrop Rand's path. This is one of the coolest pictures. It had not been around, and this was just digitized by the archivists. And this archivist right here, Danielle. I thank Judy, Ray Archives, the Southwest Harbor Library for all the Henry Rand photographs. I thank Caitlin, and I thank Edward Lothrop Rand. This is what the digital archive looks like. I'm going to put this link on it so you can definitely go to it. And I said it's a relational database, so you have information, You have connections as to, it's like a map, who's married, whose grandparents, what do they belong to, where are they mentioned in a book, and then you can click on all of those things and open up the PDFs and just, that's why I couldn't stop. So thank you. I've stopped.